HybridPathways has partnered with industry-recognized security expert and global Chief Information Security Officer Roland Cloutier to share experiences and knowledge about timely security topics. Today, Dan Hyam, managing partner at HybridPathways, is talking to Roland about CISO secrets on how to have an effective global presence without hiring anyone. Roland is highly credentialed in this area after his extensive expertise as Chief Information Security Officer at ByteDance and TikTok, ADP, EMC, and the military. He has been honored with industry recognitions including IDG CSO Hall of Fame, CISO 100, Information Security Executive of the Year, and one of the most influential people in security. He's a sought-after public speaker and has been featured in global publications, national television, and has lectured for many governments and universities around the world. He wrote the book, Becoming a Global Chief Security Executive Officer. Let's get started.
Well, welcome, Roland. Thank you very much for joining us today. I have Roland Cloutier, an esteemed mentor and colleague, as I have called him in the past, and he made fun of me for it. So I'm going to call him a all-around global CISO rock star. And today, and I actually intentionally chose this one to talk to you about because you had talked about a tagline that says CISO secrets, which is how to have an effective global, large multinational corporation enterprise, information security, cybersecurity, physical security, you name it, without hiring anyone. So first,
I just want to stretch that just a little bit.
First, I want to say, what do you mean? How does one do that? And so let's just start with a broad overview. And, what are you talking about without having to hire anyone? What does that mean?
Well, Dan, thanks again for the conversations. We have a lot of conversations, and most of them are not recorded, which are probably good. But this is actually a great conversation to have because I think a lot of our peers struggle with this, Dan. Budgets go up and down. You're asked to, there's an emergency, so you get additional headcount, but it's a tight market, and all of a sudden you lose headcount, and you're like, oh my God, we're creating new joint ventures in Asia. I have new requirements in Europe. It's on, and it's a pressure we always feel about how can I do all this work in all of these places, a global CISO, if I can't hire on all these people. And sometimes it just takes stepping back and understanding, what do I actually have to do in that area? And the concept is the term that that the HCM or our human capital management professionals and our HR departments have coined many, many years ago, which is a total effective workforce. So what does your total effective workforce need to be? Where do they what do they need to be doing, and who needs to be doing it? I mean, in today's ecosystem of your total workforce, that may include your full-time FTE. It may involve outsourcing. It may involve contractors. It may involve, surge organization, retainer-based organization. It can take on many, many different looks and feels, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have someone working 36 to 60 hours a week on a specific job in a specific region. So when I talk about, how to have an effective global presence without hiring anyone, what I'm really saying is what work needs to be done where, how often, and who needs to do it. And spending that level of kind of thinking and time, research, and evaluation can often solve some pretty big problems for you that maybe you hadn't thought about before and reduce a little bit of your stress in this job.
Okay, so I see. So now you're touching upon the concept of workforce extension. So before we kind of get into where do you start in all of this, what are the kind of skill sets that you need to be able to even go about this? You already mentioned human capital management and HR functions. They probably, I would guess, be critical in this type of process. But what do you need to be able to start to tackle, what you just described at that high level, which is understanding globally, where is the right work at the right time with the right type of talent? And we'll get into that more.
Yeah, there are a few skills that you can bring to the table as a team to help you solve this. First, it's on your own team. I mean, you're the business operations protection executive for your company. You know what it's going to take to protect that organization. So you have to know what services strategically and tactically you need across the globe. So you need to start there with your ops team. And I don't mean your SecOps team. I'm talking your BizOps team. Who's doing the work for you to help design your service delivery, your shared services capability, your budgeting and all of those sort of things as a security program. So first of all, they obviously have to be at the table. I mentioned budgeting. What's going to become really helpful for you is as you start looking at cost analysis on FTE cost versus surge cost, outsourcing through existing partnerships, doing the math behind that and say, what is the most cost-effective manner for our organization to do this? And there's some additional math there too, like how often do we need them? What is the total number of hours we will probably need? In this mix of financial math and biz ops, is super helpful to have part of your decisioning and development team. And then of course procurement. And I think that's probably an obvious one that maybe some of us overlook sometime, but I mean, just think about it. They know the contracts we have in place. They know how to make better contracts. They know how, the difference between a retained contract versus a third-party consulting contract, all of these things. And in order to do these right, and I know we'll get into it, these, you have to have the right contracts in place by geo. That's a great topic to talk on, is what do we mean by geo or theory of operation? And it really depends on the type of organization you are. But finance, procurement, security business ops, table stakes to get this done right.
Yeah, and that's good, because what I always hear as a recurring theme from you is, and I know it's high level to say this, but really business enablement, business integration, business partnership. And that seems to be a core part of this as well. And, it's interesting. I was just talking about this, and I really think it's an interesting topic. And for example, and I probably will get the timeline wrong, but 10 plus years ago, I remember when large enterprises were just thinking about maybe outsourcing some of their information security functions, like maybe an identity management help desk, or basically when you need to reset your password. And I remember when enterprises first started outsourcing this, and that was a big deal because everyone thought it might be giving the keys to the kingdom away. Now, why am I saying this? Well, the reason is because what you're talking about in terms of theater of operations and geo, what do you mean by geo? We're talking about, and where are the right talent and the right work that needs to be done. We're really talking about core competencies. And we're talking about all the different terms that we've heard in the marketplace and in the industry, such as inshoring, offshoring, nearshoring, co-sourcing, whatever you want to call it. They all mean slightly different things. But I was just hoping you could talk a little bit about not only having the skill sets that you talked about to be able to assess and identify your current state and what you want to move to, in a sense, maybe don't have to hire new employees to be able to do that. How do you assess what your core competencies truly are? Because we've come a long way from 10, 15, 20 years ago where we thought we needed to do everything in-house.
Yeah, and I'm kind of moving away from this core competency to service delivery requirements, right? So if you think about us as shared, most CISOs and CSOs and EIEIOs, we established this capability of a shared service delivery for the organization. I think we found out the best practice is not to have 15 security organizations, but have one global capability with the ability to deliver globally and locally. So then the question becomes, what are the capabilities you need to deliver those services within those jurisdictions? So I'll give you, for instance, and this is the one that really started me down on more making this a more formalized capability and process many years ago. But the EU had come up with some very specific laws around the exfiltration of information for privacy reasons and other reasons outside the EU when it came to data privacy, and it really impacted the way we thought about moving information for forensics. I mean, we used to take a snapshot, export it out into an evidence management platform, and then our digital forensics engineers would go through it, whether they were in California or Boston or Florida, it didn't matter. We would just export the information, and then it made it not possible to do that in certain theaters of operation like Europe. So does this mean I now have to hire a full-time forensics person? Well, maybe only 20% of my business, maybe only 8% of my forensics, quote unquote, business came out of Europe every year. Am I going to hire? And that equated to, if an FTE is 170 hours per month, maybe it was literally less than 10 hours per month. Does it make sense to have an FTE to do that? And the answer obviously is no, but now how do I do that? Do I get a consulting? Do I have a partner? Do I use a service, pay by the drink? And that's where really I started saying, in each theater of operation, what are the services I'm accountable to deliver? And what are the skills necessary to deliver those effectively? That's what you have to answer in each one of these. What am I delivering? Where? And what are the skills necessary? And then the simple other question is, how often do I do that? Now, in some organization, it's great. They do time management. They use the IT, time management infrastructure. Others ask people to kind of record what they do. Others, they don't ask it. But you're going to have a level of transparency and understanding of what your organization does around the globe, at what level to make these decisions. So you're going to have to figure that out. So again, it's what services I'm delivering, what parts of the world, how often am I doing it, and what skills are necessary. That gets you on a pretty good path to starting that decision process.
That's a really good point, because you're not necessarily, measuring productivity, but you're measuring the skill sets that are required and where they need to be delivered. And I think that's an important point. And another point that you also drove home was you really continue to talk about, what are the business requirements? And you gave a great example. And yes, the compliance requirements that are now required if you're handling, European Union, citizen data or something of that sort. It's just curious, for those of us who are not always have been in the trenches as much as you have, what are some examples of, other business requirements that might help drive that type of design you're talking about? Could it be, and I'm just throwing this out there, but could it be things like just knowing the business? And what I mean by that is the products that they deliver to the marketplace. That's going to have some requirements that I think are going to drive that. But I was just wondering if you could give a little bit more, examples, or at least expand on it a little bit.
Yeah, so organizational models help here, but you can go through any service area. Do I do, say I have a theater of operation that's Southwest Asia and Middle East and Africa. Do I do code development there or not? If not, do I even need to have resources available there? I certainly need to know what the business is doing. So how do we effectively use existing constructs like business security officers or BISOs, or different industries call them different things, but these are senior level people who are accountable for a area of operation that can help understand what the business is doing. I think they're great. They're great at helping the business understand their risks. They're great at helping the general service organization understand what services need to be delivered into that into that theater of operation. And they're great at making sure that the local business is getting the services they need. They act as a proponent and a champion in a way for those business leadership. So I think having that type of model in place helps, but it can be anything as simple as, let's just say we have a remote data center that is used for single purpose, and that they actually cover the company that you contract with actually does the MSSP work for monitoring an IR during the daytime hours, but you need something for nighttime hours, or vice versa. Like, you could literally surge with an MSSP for covering that remote data center in that country with the specific language you need for X number of hours. and you would get the level of monitoring your required IR capabilities, notification, and oversight without detracting, or having to set up an entire new SOC CERC in any given region, right? These are, I can get down every single process and business service delivery capability that I have in any given geo and do this exercise with it. The important thing is understanding what your business does in that region, what needs to be delivered from a security perspective, and how often it's needed.
That's great. And IR, just for mention, you're referring to incident response. And I wanted to take that one step further, which is we're seeing a little bit of a trend where global multinational companies, enterprises, organizations are, instead of, potentially outsourcing it, they're following that offshoring outsourcing model, but they're creating, shared service centers and their employees in that model. So in that example that you just gave, what would be some of the considerations, if you have any, around, okay, do we surge with an MSSP, such as a managed security services provider, or do we build a center there where we might be able to do lower cost resources as employees? What are some of the considerations?
So the size and scale, timing. So for instance, maybe you have a global capability, 24/7 operations. You operate in 3 geos already. Call it the Americas, Europe, and Asia. And then you have this really unique space that you did through an M&A. It's not on your technology platform. It hasn't rolled into your general capabilities for consuming alerts and so on and so forth. It has different playbooks and run books. And it wouldn't be useful to try to do that immediately for your organization, but you got to get monitoring up. You have to have good monitoring. You could use an MSSP for that. If you're trying to make a decision around whether, that's another whole conversation, and probably part of this series too is, when do I use an MSSP or not? That gets to the level of monitoring capability necessary, the understanding of your environment that's necessary to actually make intelligent, reasonable, and effective decisioning. Meaning, if I just need to know if something's up and down, or if I'm getting an alert specific to malware and there's an automated process that I can issue back to the customer, between me and the MSSP, that's easy. But if you have a complex grid of networks, different technologies, and it takes 6 months just to get to an analyst to understand your environment, you may want to have your own intact organization to be able to do that. So there's deciding whether to build an MSSP in region, a monitoring capability, is a pretty big decision, but it's going to be based on how deep a partnership you need. Typically, in the context of the discussion we're having today around having a global capability in region, often involves temporary use or a very specific thing. So, for instance, maybe I do have a full service critical incident response center or security operations center in a certain region, but I don't have a network forensics person that can operate at time of an incident. I would create a relationship with an in-region provider that I can call with a very specific SLA to have a network forensics engineer available when I have an incident, and then bring them in. So and that's in the context of IR, like you asked, and I can do that in various different things. Like, perhaps we don't do security product engineering in a specific region. Predominantly, that's done 90% in Europe, in a development center in Europe, say. But all of a sudden, I have a need, making sure that I have a partner that can provide that specific capability in Asia for me, in the language that my business operates in, is going to be critically important. You can often think of this as having the availability when needed, by demand, by the drink, so to speak, based on the level of commitment you're committing back to your business.
I really love that. And I love the point that I think it's a good one where, for example, if it takes 6 months for an analyst to learn the environment, then that may be a consideration where you want to have that in-house capabilities. So I think that's really good. I want to step back a little bit and give a little shout out to small and medium-sized businesses that power the majority of our economies in the world. And we've really been talking a lot about enterprises and global multinational corporations and other large organizations, and really just wanted to understand, can some of these concepts apply to SMBs?
Sure. I mean, obviously SMEs may not be doing something globally. Maybe it's just across the U.S. I mean, you have in the U.S. alone, you have 50 different jurisdictions, and the laws in New Hampshire and Florida and Texas are very different than those in, let's say, New York, California, and Illinois, right? Like the privacy and security requirements specific to consumer protection, operational defense. Think of New York financial data protection laws, things that they're just very different. So you can apply the same concept based on the requirements of the jurisdiction you're operating in, and just do it as the 50 states. Who can do this type of work for me? I mean, often small medium businesses have a security person, maybe a small team of less than 20, or maybe the CIO/director of IT does it all, right? If you're in that space, if you're in that area, it's still applicable. What are the jurisdictions that I operate in? What are the capabilities my business needs me to deliver? And then how do I deliver those to make them successful? And you can follow the same model. Do I insource to an existing team that has someone that has a specialty on it, maybe in the business? Do I use just a general consulting agreement, or do I have a different on-demand SLA for emergency services? So you can use it in the same principles. This is all about AORs, or areas of responsibility. Military, I grew up with a military background, so theaters of operation is how we prepare our capability in our mission space to deliver specific to a theater of operation, because they're all different legal considerations, different geographies, different social contexts and culture contexts. Those are all different. And so as long as you know that where you're operating, what your requirements are in those theaters of operation, like it can be states versus countries, you're on a good path. And being as simple as creating a table of what the business needs in what jurisdiction, how often you think you're going to need it, you can make some pretty good decisions there.
Well, that's excellent and wonderful. The reason why I say that is because not only is it really good points, and I think they're very practical, which is really important. And it's also a good segue, I would say, into just, for the audience, who is listening here, is what is the, you're coming to a decision of, it's kind of like build versus buy. And do I outsource or do I insource, or whatever you want to call it from that perspective? But in terms of coming to that decision of how you're going to do that, if you could just give a quick high level overview of the steps of how you accomplish that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, Dan, me, I'm a simple person, 4 or 5 steps, and I've gone way beyond, being able to talk about it. But I think we talked about the concept a minute ago about theater of operations, like making sure that you understand where you operate and where your business operates. And many times it actually, I've been on the receiving end of this thing. We have people where, right? Like getting engaged and understanding whatever makes sense for your company, how to bucket those. And sometimes people say we operate in the Americas, in EMEA, in APJ, right? Some people break off China and Hong Kong. Some people break off Southwest Asia versus Africa. Like whatever it is, know your theater of operation. 2, prioritize the services by theater, meaning I deliver 15 services to the business. That's my commitment as a business operations protection executive. How important are they in each of these theaters, right? And stack them. This is a first priority here. It's the 6th priority here. Next, look at your team. Look at your team and the requirements necessary, right? And who's going to own it. Often, maybe I can just ask IT to do it, or I can ask audit to do it, right? It's often great to say, hey, listen, audit, you're always over there asking questions anyways. Can you do my risk work for me there? Just do my data collection for me, like, and get buy-in from different partners to be able to share that work and do it at a reasonable level necessary for your business to be successful. Next thing is make sure you establish contractual requirements before you try to do this, right? Because the day that you need to go call someone and it's an emergency, your costs are going to be very different, right? So spend the time in each theater of operation to identify the partners necessary to get it done. That's really important. And whether you need one organization or 15 organizations, you decide, but spend the time up front with your partners in procurement to get that done. And the last thing is really think about the concept of a life cycle relationship. First of all, it's a life cycle maintaining. Do I still need to deliver those services in that region? Who should be doing it for me? But also the management and the relationship you have with those partners to keep a touch point. They are part of your total effective workforce. So you have to treat them like that, and you have to make sure you're maintaining those relationships. And that's really the last thing you need to do. It's work, it's effort, but again, it helps you get over the hump of, do I really have to hire a person in a geo where that will be the only security person there, and how do I keep them engaged? And gives you the ability to have a great workforce through an extended relationship ecosystem of a larger talent pool.
Well said. And if you were to leave someone with some final advice, and let's just use an example, or say, for example, that it's a new CISO, they're new to the organization, or Chief Information Security Officer, and they're new to the organization, they're just getting into what's the visibility available to them, they're going to look at what's the strategy around these concepts. What are some of the things that you would start off with in terms of, what do you need to do to prepare to be able to go through that process you just described?
Yeah, let's keep it simple, especially for, if I was going into company as a new CISO, I think all the things I just said are important. But first, know your services. What do you have to provide to the business to be successful in protecting the organization? Just know your business and their business, right? Know your industry, the regulatory requirements, and say, these are the things I should be doing to defend this organization. So know it, and know its services. Know what your teams are spending their time on. It's hard to make these decisions if you say, well, like, I don't know, should I put a forensics person in Europe? How often do I have forensics? Like, if you don't have a data collection on organizational utilization, implement one, and not to be like micromanagement, Roland. That's not what this is for. This is about understanding what people are doing, so you can effectively move your resources to where they're needed and to what they should be doing. So you should establish that. And I think applying that to a regional risk review. So what are my risks for my business operating in this area? Is industrial espionage a problem? Is natural disasters a problem? You do your risk review, you know what that is, but make sure you do that by theater, which gives you a better mechanism to make these decisions. And at the end of the day, once you have a path forward, some basic understanding of what you need to do, just go execute.
That's excellent principles to abide by. Roland, it's always been a pleasure. I thank you for your time and being able to dispense a little bit of your enormous wisdom, and I'm serious when I say that. So really appreciate the time, and thank you for being with us.
Well, Dan, thanks for having me again. This has been fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right, until next time.